I am Warren, and I just watched a video that made me genuinely angry. A young man, very confident, very polished, sat in front of a camera and told millions of people that paying off their mortgage is, and I am quoting him, a mathematical disaster. He said, "Your home equity is dead money." He said, "Keeping your mortgage forever is the safest thing you can do." He said, "You are burning hundreds of thousands of dollars of future wealth by paying off your house." And you know what the worst part is? He is partially right about the math. And that is exactly what makes his advice so dangerous. Because the most destructive financial advice in the world is not the kind that is obviously wrong. It is the kind that is 90% correct and 10% catastrophic. It is the kind that sounds brilliant in a spreadsheet and blows up in real life. And I have been investing for over 60 years. I have seen every version of this argument. I saw it before the .com crash. I saw it before 2008. Smart people with beautiful models telling everyone to use leverage. Stay invested. Never pay off debt because the math says so. And then the math met reality, and reality won. It always does. So today, I am going to do something I rarely do. I am going to take this argument apart, piece by piece. I am going to tell you what this young man got right, what he got dangerously wrong, and what you should actually do with your mortgage. And I promise you, my answer is not going to be as simple as his, because the truth about money is never simple, and anyone who tells you it is either selling you something or does not understand what they are talking about. Now, let me start by being fair, because I believe in being honest even when I disagree with someone. The core mathematical argument in that video is not wrong. If you have a mortgage at 4% and you can earn 8% in the stock market, the spread is 4% over 30 years. That 4% compounding on $100,000 is a significant amount of money. This is basic arbitrage. Banks do it every day. They borrow at one rate and lend at a higher rate and keep the difference. That is how banking works. And in theory, you can do the same thing. Keep the cheap debt, invest the difference, and pocket the spread. I understand this. I have used leverage myself in business. Berkshire Hathaway uses float from insurance operations, which is essentially borrowed money at a very low cost, and we invest it at higher returns. So I am not going to sit here and tell you that leverage is always evil or that all debt is bad. That would be dishonest, and I do not lie to people, even when the truth is complicated. But here is where this advice goes off the rails, and I need you to listen very carefully, because this is the part that could save you from making a terrible mistake. The video presents one scenario and calls it a universal truth. It takes the experience of someone who invests perfectly, never panics, never sells at the bottom, never touches their brokerage account for a vacation or a new car, earns a consistent 10% for 30 straight years, and never faces a prolonged bear market at the worst possible time. And then it says, "See, everyone should do this." That is not financial advice. That is financial fantasy. It is like telling someone they should juggle chainsaws because a professional juggler on YouTube made it look easy. The juggler is real. The skill is real. But the advice to do it yourself without acknowledging that you might lose a hand is irresponsible. Let me tell you what this young man calls dead equity, because this is where his argument reveals its deepest flaw. And frankly, it is the part that made me the angriest. He says that equity in your home is dead money. It produces no cash flow. It sits there doing nothing. It is a pile of gold you cannot eat. And he is right that home equity is not liquid. You cannot walk into a grocery store and hand them a piece of your foundation. That part is obviously true, but calling it dead money, that is one of the most reckless things I have ever heard a financial commentator say. Let me tell you what that equity actually is. It is a fortress. It is the thing that stands between you and the street. It is the thing that means no bank, no creditor, no economic catastrophe can take the roof from over your family's head. When you own your home free and clear, you have eliminated the single largest fixed expense in your life. You have removed the one payment that, if you cannot make it, leads to foreclosure. You have created a floor beneath which you cannot fall. And this young man calls that dead. I call it the opposite of dead. I call it the most alive, most powerful, most resilient financial position a family can be in. You know what is actually dead money? The money you invested in the stock market in October of 2007, and then panic, sold in March of 2009 at a 50% loss because you lost your job and you needed cash, and you could not stomach watching your account drop another 10%. That is dead money. It is not coming back. You killed it. And you killed it because you were following advice exactly like this. Advice that assumed you would behave like a robot when the world was falling apart. I have been through 1987 when the market dropped 22% in a single day. I have been through the dot-com collapse when the Nasdaq fell 78%. I have been through 2008 when people who thought they were geniuses lost everything. And in every single one of those crises, do you know who slept soundly? The people who owned their homes outright, not the people with brokerage accounts and mortgages and clever arbitrage strategies. The people with no debt and a roof over their heads. Because when the world is burning, liquidity is not a brokerage statement. Liquidity is knowing that no matter what happens, you have a place to live and no one can take it from you. Now, let me address the most seductive number in this entire argument, because it is the number that makes smart people do stupid things. 10%, the historical average return of the S&P 500. This young man uses it like it is a guarantee. He says, invest $1,000 a month at 10% for 30 years, and you will have $2 million. And mathematically, if you compound $1,000 a month at 10% annually for 30 years, yes, you get approximately $2 million. The calculation is correct, but the assumption is a lie, not a deliberate lie. I do not think this young man is dishonest, but it is a lie that the financial industry has been telling for so long that everyone believes it, and it has become one of the most dangerous myths in personal finance. Here is the truth about that 10%. First, it is a nominal return, not a real return. After inflation, the S&P 500 has returned closer to 6.5% to 7% historically. So immediately, your spread over a 4% mortgage just got cut in half. Second, that average includes some of the greatest bull markets in human history. It includes the 1980s and 1990s, when stocks went up more than 10-fold. If you started investing in the year 2000, your annualized return through 2012 was approximately 0%, not 10. 0 for 12 years. Do you know what would have happened to the person in that video's scenario who kept their mortgage and invested in the S&P 500? Starting in the year 2000, they would have had 12 years of mortgage payments, 12 years of interest charges, and an investment account that went nowhere. They would have been paying the bank every month for the privilege of watching their clever strategy produce nothing. Meanwhile, the boring neighbor who paid off their house in 2005 would have been sitting on their porch, stress-free, with no payments, no debt, and no anxiety. And here is what no one talks about. There is something called sequence of returns, risk. It does not matter what the average return is over 30 years. What matters is the order in which those returns arrive. If you get terrible returns in the first 10 years, when you are making your contributions and building your base, the compounding engine never gets going. A 10% average that starts with a decade of losses looks nothing like a 10% average that starts with a decade of gains. The same average, radically different outcomes. This young man did not mention sequence of returns risk once. Not once, because it destroys his argument. And I have seen this movie before. I was watching it in 2006 when mortgage brokers were telling people to take out home equity lines of credit and invest in real estate because home prices always go up. They had the data to prove it too. Decades of appreciation, charts going up and to the right, mathematical certainty. And then it all collapsed and millions of families lost their homes. The data was real. The history was real. But the conclusion was catastrophically wrong because it assumed the future would look like the past. And the future never asks permission from the past. And this brings me to the part of this argument that nobody wants to hear, because it is about you, not the market, not the math. You, the human being, making these decisions with a brain that was designed to hunt animals on the savannah, not to manage a leveraged portfolio during a financial crisis. There is a study by a firm called Dalbar that has tracked the actual returns of real investors for over 30 years. And do you know what they found? The average equity investor earned approximately 3.5% per year over the last 30 years. Not 10%, not 8, 3.5. The S&P 500 returned 10% during that same period, and the average person who was invested in it earned 3.5. Why? Because people are not robots. They panic. They sell at the bottom. They buy at the top. They hear bad news, and they liquidate. They see their neighbor making money, and they chase. They pull money out to buy things. They stop contributing when they are scared. The 10% return only exists for the person who invested on day one, never looked at their account, never sold a single share, and never touched the money for 30 years. That person is essentially fictional. So when this young man says you will earn 10%, what he is really saying is you will earn 10% if you are not a human being. And I am sorry, but you are a human being. I am a human being. I have been doing this for 6 decades, and even I feel the pull of fear when markets crash. The difference is I have trained myself to resist it. Most people have not. Most people will take that $1,000 a month they were going to invest, and when the market drops 40%, they will stop. They will freeze, or worse, they will sell everything and lock in the loss. And then the arbitrage strategy, the one that looked so brilliant on a spreadsheet, produces a return of negative 20% instead of positive 10. Meanwhile, the paid-off house is still standing, still sheltering the family, still costing nothing every month. So here is what I actually believe, and I want you to listen, because I am not going to give you a bumper sticker. I am going to give you a framework. First, If you do not have 6 months of living expenses in cash in a savings account, not invested, not in stocks, in cash, then you have no business making extra mortgage payments or investing extra money. Your first job is to build a fortress of cash. That protects you from the unexpected. This is not optional. This is survival. Second, know your interest rate. If your mortgage rate is below 4% and you locked it in during the low-rate era, that is a gift. Do not rush to pay it off. Take the extra money and invest it, but only if you can pass the next test. Third, and this is the most important one, be honest with yourself about who you are. If you are the kind of person who will invest consistently for 30 years without ever panicking, without ever selling at the bottom, without ever raiding the account for a vacation, then yes, the math favors keeping the mortgage and investing the difference. But if you are the kind of person who checks your portfolio every day, who feels sick when the market drops 5%, who pulled money out of the market in 2020 or 2022, then the arbitrage strategy is not for you. For you, paying off the mortgage is not a mathematical disaster. It is a guaranteed return equal to your interest rate, with zero volatility, zero risk of panic selling, and the psychological benefit of knowing no one can take your home. That is not irrational. That is self-awareness. And self-awareness is the most valuable financial skill in the world. Fourth, never use the word never. Never pay off your mortgage is just as dogmatic and dangerous as always. Pay off your mortgage. The right answer depends on your rate, your income stability, your risk tolerance, your age, your discipline, and your sleep. Anyone who gives you a universal answer to a personal question is not giving you advice. They are giving you content. I want to close with something simple. I bought my house in Omaha in 1958 for $31,500. I still live in it, and I could have taken out a mortgage and invested the money and made millions more. The math would have supported it, but I did not need to because I understood something that spreadsheets cannot capture. Peace of mind has a value. Security has a value. And the ability to walk into your home and know with absolute certainty that it belongs to you and no one else, that it is not a mathematical disaster. That is the foundation of a life well lived. Do not let anyone, not a YouTuber, not a financial advisor, not even me, tell you that the smartest thing you can do with your money is the thing that keeps you up at night. The smartest thing you can do with your money is the thing that lets you think clearly, act rationally, and sleep like a baby. Build your cash reserve first. Invest consistently second, and make the mortgage decision based on who you actually are, not who some spreadsheet assumes you to be. Because in the end, the greatest risk in finance is not a bear market. It is not inflation. It is not a 4% interest rate. The greatest risk is you making a decision you do not understand in a moment you are not prepared for. With money, you cannot afford to lose. That is the only risk that has ever mattered. I am Warren, and that is what I know for sure. If this changed how you think about your mortgage, share it with someone you care about. Not because they need to agree with me, but because they deserve to hear both sides before they make a decision that will shape the rest of their financial life. I will see you next time.